A crown of gold, a throne of power, a kingdom bowing at your feet. You'd think royalty had it all, wouldn't you? But what if I told you that some of the most powerful monarchs in history, the ones who lived in palaces dripping with jewels and silk, smelled so bad that their own servants gagged when they walked by? What if the price of absolute power was living in your own filth for months, even years at a time? Here's something to think about. Have you ever skipped a shower for just one day and felt absolutely disgusting? That sticky, uncomfortable feeling that makes you rush to wash it off. Now multiply that by weeks, by months. Some of these rulers went their entire lives barely touching water, and they did it on purpose. Why would anyone choose to live like that? Because they believed bathing could kill them. Doctors convinced them that water opened their bodies to plague and death. Priests told them it was sinful, so instead of washing, they drowned themselves in perfume, piled on layer after layer of clothes, and smeared their faces with poisonous makeup that rotted their skin. Today, you're about to meet 6 kings and queens who ruled empires but couldn't face a bathtub. Their hygiene was so shockingly terrible that even in their own time, people whispered about the stench. From England's Virgin Queen to France's Sun King, these monarchs prove that power and cleanliness don't always go hand in hand. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you're already disgusted. Subscribe because what's coming next is going to make your skin crawl. I promise you won't believe some of these stories. Let's start with the Queen who declared she only bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not. Elizabeth I of England. Elizabeth avers the Virgin Queen's dirty secret. Elizabeth I ruled England from 1558 to 1603. She crushed the Spanish Armada. She turned England into a global power. Poets called her Gloriana. Ambassadors trembled before her wit and intelligence. But there was one battle Elizabeth refused to fight. The battle against her own filth. Elizabeth had a famous rule about bathing. She declared almost proudly, "I bathe once a month whether I need it or not. Once a month." And she said it like she was doing herself a favor. Why? Because in the 1500s, doctors believed that hot water was a death trap. They thought bathing opened your pores and let in plague, fever, and poisonous air. To Elizabeth, soaking in a tub wasn't relaxation. It was rolling the dice with death itself. So she avoided it like her life depended on it, because she thought it did. Instead of water, Elizabeth had another plan. She believed that changing into fresh linen undergarments kept her clean. The medical theory of the time claimed that fabric absorbed all the sweat and impurities from the skin. So her laundresses worked endlessly, providing stacks of clean linen shifts. Elizabeth would peel off the old one, put on a new one, and consider herself washed. Problem solved. Except it wasn't. Now let's talk about her face. Elizabeth was obsessed with looking pale and youthful. She coated her face in white lead foundation, a thick, poisonous paste that gave her that ghostly royal glow. But here's the thing. She didn't wash it off. She just kept adding more layers. Week after week, that makeup built up into a cracked, flaking mask. Imagine sweat, oil, and powder mixed together for so long that it hardened like plaster. Beneath it, scars from smallpox festered and rotted, hidden under the illusion of beauty. And the smell? Elizabeth drowned herself in perfume. Her chambers were filled with pomanders, little balls stuffed with spices and herbs meant to cover bad odors. Courtiers wrote endlessly about her magnificent gowns, her golden wigs, her commanding presence, but not one of them ever praised her scent. That silence? It speaks volumes. So while Elizabeth dazzled Europe with her power, the truth was far grimmer. She was a queen wrapped in perfume, poisonous makeup, and denial. All because she feared the one thing that could have actually helped her, a simple bath. Louis XIV, the Sun King's stinking shadow. Now we cross the English Channel to France, to the man who built Versailles, the king who called himself the Sun King because he believed he was the center of the universe. Louis XIV. He reigned for 72 years, from 1643 to 1715, the longest reign of any European monarch. He commanded armies. He threw lavish parties. He wore more silk and gold than most people would see in a lifetime. But according to records, Louis XIV bathed only twice in his entire life. Twice, in 72 years. Louis despised water. He thought it made people weak and sick. Instead, he turned to other solutions. Mountains of perfume. Literally gallons of the stuff. He changed his silk stockings and lace shirts constantly, believing that fresh fabric equaled cleanliness. His servants spent hours dressing and redressing him, layering him in expensive cloth to hide what soap and water could have fixed in minutes. One ambassador wrote about meeting Louis in person. He said that when the Sun King entered a room, you smelled him before you saw him. And it wasn't a compliment. The scent wasn't just strong. It was overwhelming. A suffocating cloud of perfume desperately trying to mask the stench of unwashed flesh beneath all that finery. Think about Versailles for a moment, the most famous palace in the world. Crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls, gardens that stretched for miles. But behind all that beauty, the halls reeked. Nobles who hadn't bathed in months mingled together, drowning themselves in oils and powders. The glamour was real, but so was the stink. Louis lived like a god on earth. But even gods, apparently, couldn't escape their own sweat. Drop a comment below and tell me this. Would you rather rule an empire but never bathe, or live as a commoner with access to a hot shower every day? Let me know what you choose. Now let's move on to another king who took dirty royalty to a whole new level. James I of England. Double royal filth. James I and Isabella of Castile. James I, the Scratching King. James I became King of England in 1603, right after Elizabeth died. He united England and Scotland under one crown. He commissioned the King James Bible, one of the most important religious texts ever written. But James had a strange belief about hygiene that made even his dirtiest peers uncomfortable. James thought that bathing was actively harmful to your health. He once declared, "The dirtier the skin, the healthier the man." He genuinely believed that dirt protected the body like armor, so he rarely bathed. He wore the same clothes for weeks at a time. He let his hair grow wild and greasy. But the worst part? The scratching. James scratched himself constantly. During royal audiences, while signing documents, even while knights knelt before him for honors. His clothes were infested with lice and fleas. Courtiers complained in private letters about having to stand near him. They described watching him dig at his scalp, his arms, his chest, leaving his expensive robes covered in dead insects and flakes of skin. Can you imagine kneeling before your king to receive a title, and the whole time he's scratching at lice crawling through his hair? That was life under James I. Power and parasites, all wrapped up in one unwashed package. Isabella of Castile, the queen who wore her filth like a badge. Now let's travel south to Spain. To Queen Isabella of Castile, who ruled from 1474 to 1504. Isabella is famous for funding Christopher Columbus. She helped unite Spain and launch it into a golden age of exploration and conquest. But she's also famous for something else. A quote that still shocks historians today. Isabella once bragged, "I have only bathed twice in my entire life. Once when I was born, and once when I got married. Twice. In 53 years of life." And she said it with pride. Why? Because Isabella believed that bathing was immodest and sinful. She thought it encouraged vanity and lust. To her, avoiding water was a sign of purity and devotion to God. Instead of bathing, she relied on scented oils and prayer. She believed her soul's cleanliness mattered more than her body's. But here's the reality. That pure approach likely fueled infections, skin diseases, and discomfort that no amount of prayer could fix. Life at the Spanish court may have looked grand from a distance, but up close it smelled like religious devotion mixed with rotting skin. Isabella conquered kingdoms, but she couldn't conquer her fear of a bathtub. Louis XIII, the screaming bath escape. If you thought Louis XIV was bad, meet his father, Louis XIII, who ruled France from 1610 to 1643. This king took the family tradition of avoiding water to an entirely new level. Louis XIII hated baths so violently that when doctors ordered him to bathe for medical reasons, he had to be physically dragged into the tub. Servants would grab his arms while he screamed and thrashed like a child. Grown men had to hold down the King of France just to get him into warm water. Once they finally got him in, he would cry, curse, and beg to be let out. The moment they released him, he'd leap from the tub and refuse to go near one again for months, maybe years. So what did Louis do instead? He changed his clothes obsessively, multiple times a day. He believed that swapping out fabric kept his body healthy. He piled on fresh linen shirts, new stockings, clean breeches, all while never actually washing the skin underneath. His servants spent their days dressing and undressing him like a royal doll. And the smell? Louis covered it with powders. Clouds of scented powder followed him everywhere. His court reeked of musk and rose oil as nobles tried desperately to mask their own stench. The halls of French palaces during his reign must have smelled like a perfume shop built on top of a stable. If you're enjoying these shocking stories, smash that share button and send this to someone who loves wild history. Trust me, they'll thank you. Father and son, both kings of France, both terrified of soap. But now, let's move to the most famous royal of them all. The Queen, whose name is still whispered with fascination and tragedy. Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette, perfumed tragedy. When you think of Marie Antoinette, you probably picture jewels, champagne, and endless parties at Versailles. The young Austrian princess who became Queen of France in 1774. The woman blamed for saying, "Let them eat cake," even though she never actually said it. She's remembered as the ultimate symbol of royal excess. But here's what history books don't tell you. Behind all that glamour, Marie Antoinette was far from clean. Yes, Versailles had bathing rooms. Marie even had her own private bath installed, a luxury most people couldn't dream of. But she rarely used it. Like the royals before her, she'd been taught that bathing too often was dangerous. Doctors warned that hot water opened the body to deadly illness. To soak in a tub, they said, was to invite death itself. So Marie chose a different method, the dry bath. Her maids would rub her body with cloths soaked in alcohol or vinegar, believing it cleansed the skin without the supposed risks of water. Afterward, she'd change into fresh linen undergarments, layer after layer. The royal version of freshening up without ever touching a drop of real water. Perfume became her shield. Marie Antoinette lived in a constant cloud of scent, floral waters, rose oils, orange blossoms, musk. She spent fortunes on bottles and bottles of fragrance. Her towering wigs, those massive creations piled high on her head, weren't just fashion statements. They were dusted with flour and powder to mask the smell of sweat. Courtiers wrote about her obsession with perfumes, how she needed them just to feel presentable. But beneath the makeup and silk, the truth was ugly. Her face, painted white with rouge on her cheeks, often hid blemishes and irritation from the heavy cosmetics. Her elaborate gowns trapped sweat beneath countless layers of fabric and tight corsets. In the suffocating heat of Versailles, the Queen and her ladies worried more about repowdering and perfuming than actually washing their bodies. Then came the French Revolution. In 1789, everything collapsed. The angry crowds who stormed Versailles accused Marie of living in obscene luxury while they starved. They dragged her from her perfumed palace and threw her into a filthy prison cell. The cruelest irony? Marie Antoinette, who once hid behind clouds of expensive perfume, now stank worse than ever. Not because she feared bathing, but because the revolution had stripped away even her perfumed mask. The Queen, who'd spent her life avoiding real cleanliness, finally knew what true filth felt like. In 1793, she was executed. Her final days were spent in grime and despair, a tragic end for a woman who'd once ruled from a golden throne. When we look back at these 6 rulers, it's almost impossible to believe. The most powerful people on earth. Kings and queens who commanded armies, built palaces, and shaped the course of history. Yet they were terrified of something as simple as soap and water. They weren't just skipping the occasional shower. For them, avoiding baths was a lifestyle, a belief system, even a point of pride. They genuinely thought water could poison their bodies, open their skin to deadly diseases, or tempt them into sinful vanity. Their doctors warned them, their traditions reinforced it, and so they hid their filth under mountains of perfume, layers of powder, and constant clothing changes. The result? A world where beauty was painted on with toxic white lead, where perfume was used like armor against your own stench, where silk sheets absorbed sweat and rot because water was seen as the enemy. Elizabeth I ruled with brilliance but feared her own bathtub. Louis XIV built Versailles but only bathed twice in his life. James I scratched at lice during royal ceremonies. Isabella of Castile wore her filth like a religious badge. Louis XIII screamed when forced into water. And Marie Antoinette hid behind perfume until revolution tore it all away. So the next time you step into a hot shower, take a moment to appreciate it. Because for most of human history, even the richest and most powerful people alive didn't have what you have. They lived in palaces but smelled like animals. They wore crowns but crawled with parasites. They commanded nations but couldn't command basic cleanliness. History remembers them as majestic and untouchable. But if you'd stood close enough, the truth would have hit your nose before your eyes ever saw the crown. Now it's your turn. Which royal shocked you the most? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you learned something today, hit that like button and subscribe for more wild history stories you won't believe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.